Hello and welcome to this video in which I'm going to be talking about one of the reading competition exercises in CAT 2023 slot 2. In this video, I'm going to be talking about when we are reading the passage, what is it that we are supposed to take away from the passage. I'll solve the questions of this exercise in a separate video, the link of which will be tagged in the description of this video. Okay. So let's look at this passage. This passage starts off by someone's name, Umberto Eco. I think that is not even important. The most important part of the first sentence is one word in the first half and then the last phrase. So the one word in the first half, which is very, very important, is the word right. The writer was right when he said the language of Europe is translation. So the author is saying the writer was right, which means the author is agreeing with the writer's opinion that the language of Europe is translation. Translation is what? Translation is translating from one language to the other. When we read this sentence, immediately we should understand that the author is talking about Europe as a continent, and Western Europe especially, is the home of so many different languages. You've got Spanish, French, Italian, Portuguese, English, of course. You've got Scandinavian languages. So all those languages are there, and he says that the language of Europe, that's why, is translation, and that kind of makes sense. That in order to understand each other in Europe, you have to translate from one language to the other. That is what the author is beginning with. So he is talking about language and translation within Europe in the very first sentence. Then he brings up the topic of Netflix, and he talks about Netflix twice. And even with respect to Netflix, he's talking about the kind of languages that Netflix shows are getting dubbed in. So he's now weaving the topic of language into Netflix. So these are the two very prominent themes which we can understand in the very first paragraph. Now, the second paragraph is talking about how Netflix has become more and more popular. The economics of European productions are more appealing to. He's saying all of these things. He's talking about one particular show, Lupin, which became pretty global. Although it was a French show, it became pretty global in its reach because of Netflix. And then he's giving a very key sentence here, again, a very key sentence to note off in the second paragraph, is the statistic that in 2015, 75% of Netflix's original content was American. Now that figure is half. So which means now American content is lesser and European content is actually taking over. So this is also probably the author's way of talking about how dubbing has made it easier to consume content which are not necessarily American, not necessarily English, but even European content has become easier to sell on a platform like Netflix, which is pretty global. Next paragraph, first sentence though, is kind of a bellwether. To tell us what this paragraph is about, it says that not everything works across borders. So yes, of course, we have had European shows which are becoming increasingly popular world over, but not everything works. So the author is going to talk about in this paragraph what does not work. So he first talks about what kind of shows works, that comedies don't work, whodunits works, and bloodthirsty maelstroms between arch-Romans and uppity business or tribesmen have a more universal appeal. So violent shows, detective shows have more appeal than comedies. That's what the author is talking about. And then the author is also saying what doesn't work in the sense that national broadcasters are companies which broadcast on television shows. So instead of Netflix, national broadcasters are still dominating in places like Germany, more than Netflix or Disney Plus. And why? Because there's a generation of teens who have just started looking at the phones, but the elders still gawp at the box. It means they're still looking at the television. The box here is referring to television. So what does not work has been captured in this particular paragraph. Then the next paragraph, the author begins by saying that in Brussels and national capitals, the prospect of Netflix as a cultural hegemon is seen as a threat. So cultural hegemon is domination. Okay, when you have got hegemony, you have the power over it. You have the power to dominate something. So Netflix is being seen as a cultural dominator that's going to dominate culture, and it is seen as a threat in a lot of national capitals like Brussels. And the word cultural sovereignty is a watchword. And then the author is talking about why he believes that people are thinking that Netflix is going to dominate the national culture. And for that, he's saying that Netflix is stripping out local quirks. So local quirks of different languages, different regions are being stripped out for more universal appeal. So it's kind of a uncanny valley. Uncanny valley means that something that you cannot place it exactly in a particular place. It's very weird in the sense that there are shows set in Europe, but then it's devoid of any kind of quirks, any kind of regional affectations. And that is why people are fearing that this is going to take over Europe and it's going to dominate the individual culture, that individual cultures are going to become lesser and lesser prominent in media. And that might cause some kind of harm to local cultures. That is what the author is trying to say. And that has been described in a greater level of detail in this paragraph. And then the author ends with saying that this makes European politicians nervous because the politicians are going to support platforms like Netflix, which are going to dominate the local culture and suppress it, then people might go against them. So governments are wary that should we create some kind of law against streaming platforms like Netflix. But then first sentence of the next paragraph, the author is saying they should not be. They should not be, the European politicians should not be worried, should not be nervous about platforms like Netflix because this is not what is going to happen. And then the author is talking about how European integration happens or has happened in the past because of American companies that facilitate this kind of translation. And just like Google Translate, the author is sharing the point that platforms like Netflix will actually work towards bringing Europe together. When more people within a continent, irrespective of the language that they know, irrespective of the country they are from, if they start watching all Netflix shows, then they will have more in common to discuss, and that will help them come together, come closer to each other, understand each other better, and then whatever cross-border endeavors that Europeans try to do, because Europe is a union. So European Union needs to work together. They have a common currency. They also take part in fair trade. So all of that becomes easier, is what the author is saying in the last paragraph. So he's saying that the nervousness of European politicians to see Netflix as a cultural dominator is misplaced, and it will actually help to bring the European cultures together. These are the things that we have to understand about the passage. If we read the passage and if we understand these things, we have understood the passage well enough to answer questions. Now, I want to discuss a few more things about the passage. The word count of the passage is 521 words, slightly on the longer side, but still not very long. Close to average of 500 word length, as far as cat reading comprehension exercises are concerned. The type of passage is analytical because the author is analyzing the impact of Netflix now dubbing their shows in multiple different languages and how they're bringing more and more non-American shows into the foray, and whether it's beneficial for Netflix, whether it's going to affect Europe in a positive or negative fashion. These are things that are being analyzed. It's an analytical passage, absolutely. It is picked up from The Economist, again, a foreign magazine and international source. So the kind of language, a few words that are present here might not be something that we're aware of. So this is why reading international content is very important. To read from sources like The Economist can actually help us understand the language that is used in a lot of cat reading comprehension passages better. I would say the ideal time, if someone is good at reading comprehension exercises, in about 2.5 minutes, you can read the passage because language is still pretty simple, although few words here and there might be of a higher level of vocabulary, and it's things that we can actually relate to. I think a lot of us have watched dubbed shows on Netflix, either from Indian regional languages or from foreign shows. Like I think Dark is something that people have watched a lot. Even Money Heist, for that matter, is a dubbed show. So things like that people have been watching. So it's a very relatable kind of a content. So I think 2.5 minutes is a good time to finish reading the passage. Acceptable time to read, because language is of a slightly higher level in terms of vocabulary, is about 200 seconds. If you're taking more than 200 seconds to read a passage like this, you are somewhere losing concentration and focus, and you're not making optimum use of your time. The overall difficulty level of this passage, I will still say, is moderate. There are a couple of reasons for it. One is, of course, there are a few words that you might not be knowing the meanings of. Vocabulary can be a bit of a hindrance. But more than that, what makes this passage a moderate read, moderate level difficulty as far as reading is concerned, is because the passage is not a monolith. It's not like the same point is being made by the author throughout. The author is making different points in every paragraph. He brings about the topic of language, then dubbing, then Netflix succeeding in bringing more content from Europe. What kind of content succeed? What kind of content fails? Why are people afraid of the kind of content, European content, that Netflix is putting on their platform? And then the author's opinion of why they should not worry about the type of content. So different points about the same topic of discussion. So I have to keep track, concentrate very hard on every single paragraph to know where is the author going towards with respect to the topic of discussion. So that can make it a bit difficult for us to understand overall what the passage is talking about. So moderate level read. And things to learn. After reading this passage, we should know the meaning of the word hegemon. Hegemon, I think I discussed. Hegemon is capability to dominate, capability to have power over something. So you have got a hegemony over it. Maelstrom. Maelstrom is a very common word. It's another word used for vortexes and whirlpools. In water bodies, when you've got vortices, very violent big vortices, which are generally present in sea storms or in river storms, then that kind of a vortex is called a maelstrom. It is also used to denote any kind of a chaotic environment. A lot of chaos is happening, a lot of confusion is happening. There's a maelstrom, a lot of activity is happening. That's a maelstrom. Who done it? So who done it is a kind of a colloquial term. It is actually a combination of who do it, or who does it, or who has done it. So a whodunit show or a whodunit book is kind of a suspense thriller to find out that who is the criminal, who is the killer. Those kind of books and shows are called whodunit. So the entire work of literature or work of media is about finding out who the culprit is. And polyglot, I think you should be knowing the meaning of this. Polyglot refers to a person who can speak more than two languages. So when they speak many languages, they are polyglots. So these words' meanings you should be knowing, you should find out. Apart from a bit of geographical understanding of Europe, I think these things can help you understand the passage a bit more better. And that's what we have to learn after you finish reading a passage like this. Okay, so this is what reading of this passage entails. Next video, I'll talk about the questions and the solutions of this exercise. Thank you.